and churches of Europe, and to Montreal for classical holiday favorites. Sunday, December 22nd, starting at 9 a.m., 9:30 in Newfoundland on CBC Music. And on the CBC Listen app. For the full broadcast schedule, go to cbcmusic.ca/joy.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC Listen app.
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're at minus 24 with an extreme cold warning and sunny skies in downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon, I'm Matt Humphrey. The superintendent of the Manitoba RCMP Major Crimes Unit says his team is overworked with almost double the amount of homicides this year than last year. So far this year, there have been 56 homicides in RCMP jurisdictions. Last year, there were 30 and 3 suspicious deaths. Superintendent Rob Lassen says in most cases, the suspect and the victim knew each other.
We are seeing increased gang violence, so they're part of a group. We're seeing some retaliation between groups of people, whether it be a gang or association. So one violent crime may be committed, and then there's a retaliatory event happen maybe weeks or even months later.
Lassen says multiple person homicides were another factor in the dramatic increase in this year's numbers. In one case in Carman, Manitoba, 5 people were killed. In another case in McCreary, 3 people were murdered. Lassen believes this year may have been an anomaly, but Mounties are looking for a possible trend to explain the increase. Winnipeg councillors will make decisions on 2 major pieces of the city's transportation network, including a final vote on a motion that would have lowered the speed limit on Wellington Crescent. The CBC's Cameron McLean has your details.
A motion to lower the speed limit on Wellington Crescent to 30 kilometers an hour lost momentum last week. In a narrow vote, the Executive Policy Committee stripped out the section telling city staff to immediately put up new speed limit signs. Cycling advocates and some city councillors have pushed for the lower speed as a way to improve safety. A man was hit and killed by a speeding driver in the summer. But Mayor Scott Gillingham raised concerns about the wider impacts on the surrounding streets. Council will also vote on a report laying out the costs for replacing the Arlington Bridge. The 2025 draft budget unveiled yesterday had no money devoted to the work needed to demolish the aging bridge. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Ontario is introducing new legislation making it easier to dismantle homeless camps. But advocates say what the province really needs is more affordable and supportive housing. Jamie Strachan has more.
I don't know any community that wants encampments in their backyard.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford is touting new legislation that he says will give police forces more power to clear out the encampments that have become part of the urban landscape across the country.
Well, we want to do it immediately, as quickly as possible. As soon as we can get this through, they'll give the tools to not only municipalities, but the police.
The legislation includes increased fines and possible jail time for repeat trespassers and those who use illicit drugs in public. The province also announced $75 million to increase affordable housing and shelter spaces. But homeless advocates like Reverend Canon Maggie Healy says this does nothing to solve the real problem.
The vast majority of people who are cleared from one encampment just end up in another one because they're not being offered anything stable or lasting.
The legislation is expected to pass in February. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Health Canada says more than 15,000 Canadians chose medical assistance in dying last year. That amounts to nearly 1 in 20 deaths in the country last year. An overwhelming majority of people who requested assisted dying had a foreseeable natural death, and cancer was the most frequent cause. In the United States, the White House is issuing more than 36 pardons, along with commuting more than 1,000 sentences. Richard Madden has the details.
President Joe Biden announcing he'll commute the sentences for some 1,500 Americans who were released from prison to home confinement during the pandemic. Another 39 inmates pardoned for nonviolent crimes like simple drug possessions, or former members of the military convicted for their private conduct because of their sexual orientation. Now, Biden said in a statement, America was built on second chances, so he's extending mercy on those who've demonstrated remorse and rehabilitations. These pardons follow his controversial pardon of of his son Hunter, who was convicted of gun and tax crimes. And Biden's staff are also reportedly considering taking the extraordinary step of issuing preemptive pardons to protect top government officials who've been critical of incoming President Donald Trump and who could be targeted when he takes office just over 5 weeks from now. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
And Time Magazine has named its Person of the Year for 2024.
It's really been something very special, and I have to say, Time Magazine getting this honor for the second time, I think I like it better this time, actually. Because
That's President-elect Donald Trump, who the magazine is honoring yet again. Meanwhile, tech giant Meta has donated $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund. CEO Mark Zuckerberg didn't publicly endorse a candidate during the election campaign. He does say he was impressed with the way Trump responded to the attempt on his life during a rally. The donation comes weeks after Zuckerberg met with Trump in Florida. For news anytime, you can head to cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can use the CBC News app. In Winnipeg, an extreme cold warning this afternoon. Mainly clear, though. A high of -25 with a bitter wind chill. Extreme cold in Brandon as well. Sunny, very windy with chill. A high of -28. Dauphin extreme cold, a high of -24 and sunny. Flin Flon sunny, a high of -26 with a wind chill. Thompson a mix of sun and cloud, a high of -24. And in Churchill, light snow at times and windy, a high around -17.
Good afternoon, Manitoba. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, 97.9 FM in Brandon, 100.9 FM in Thompson. I'm Emily Brass, filling in as your host today. Here's what's coming up on the show. While the holidays can bring joy, they can also be a tough time for folks who are feeling lonely. We'll get tips from a counselor in Steinbach on how to cope with loneliness. Coming up on our call-in conversation, the Winnipeg City budget for 2025 is out, and a 5.95% property tax hike is coming. How do you feel about that? We'll want to hear from you after the 12:30 news. But up first, we've been hearing about viruses and fungicides threatening bees. Now beekeepers across Manitoba and Canada say this winter could bring disastrous results for their hives. We'll find out why and what apiarists say the government should do to help. Seven minutes after 12 o'clock, -25 and mostly cloudy at the Winnipeg airport. Well, bees have been facing a number of threats in recent years, from parasites to harmful agricultural chemicals. Now, the Canadian Honey Council is warning this winter could bring the biggest losses of bees yet. Beekeepers in Manitoba are keeping a close eye on the situation and what could be done to help keep their hives going. Joining us now is Ossie Podolsky, a third-generation apiarist from the Podolsky Honey Farms in Ethelbert near Riding Mountain National Park. He's also a member of Manitoba Beekeepers Association. Hello, Ossie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, we're so glad you could join us. Let's just start with, maybe you can explain why this winter is expected to be a really hard one for bees.
Well, going into winter, there was a lot of hive health concerns. Bee colonies were looking on the small side, as well as seeing high viral loads from parasites such as the varroa mite. And prior to going into winter through the honey production season, some operations such as ourselves seen exorbitant losses from beginning of June up until the end of September, even prior to the winter season.
And also, it was a wet year this year. How did that affect things?
Well, due to the wet year, there was a lot of fungicide use and continual fungicide use, as well as other chemicals being sprayed on the crops. And there's more research being done that even though these chemicals don't kill bees, they damage the young when they're in the breeding process and actually inhibit hive growth and their ability to make replacement bees as older bees die off.
Yeah. Maybe explain, not having those replacement bees and those issues you touched on. How does that end up threatening whole hives and colonies of bees?
So after the honey production season, when you get into September, the old bees that have expended their life harvesting honey, they start to die off at a very fast rate. And at that point is when the compounding effects of the fungicides and pesticides typically start to show up in the beehive. So what you have is the brood or the young bees aren't hatching and maturing fast enough. Too many of them are dying. So the population of the colony continues to what we call dwindle, reduces in size, and then you have a small non-viable colony going into winter.
Mm. And so, how big a proportion of bees in Canada do people think, people in the industry think might be lost because of all these problems?
It's hard to say. I know in our operation, before even going into winter, we had lost 24%. And going through the winter, from what was left when we put them into the winter, of the remaining colonies, 10% to 15% were dead by about mid-November. And then here by mid-December, I checked earlier this week, and we're sitting about 40% of what went into winter. So I think coming out by spring, we'll be nearing a 90% overwinter loss.
90%.
And many beekeepers are reiterating the same tune all across Canada.
I mean, that's just such a huge loss. Where would that leave your business? It's been in your family since 1954, Podolsky Honey Farms. What would happen?
Well, the monetary loss is huge. We're expecting that to be around the $1.2 million mark. We're going to try and make arrangements to buy bees from other beekeepers, but it's hard for other beekeepers to make a commitment, as they don't know how many bees they're going to have alive in the spring. They can't sell bees they don't have. And then the other option is we could try and order packages from overseas, but sometimes the cost can be a factor, and logistics getting them here, as well as the quality coming on a flight all the way from Australia or New Zealand. Sometimes they can arrive with over half of the packages of bees being dead on that shipment.
Well, and speaking of replenishing your stocks and importing bees, you and a lot of other beekeepers are calling on Ottawa to make some changes that might help you replenish those stocks. Tell us about that.
Yes, we've been pushing for many, many years now for the Canadian Food Inspection State to reverse their decision on closing the U.S. from importing packaged bees into Canada. They're our next door neighbor, and we already ship queens out of Northern California. There's protocols and inspections put in place, and we would like them to use those protocols and inspections as a framework to make a program to import packaged bees into Canada, to give us another option to just mitigate our risk and split not have all of our eggs in one basket.
And I mean, what do you think about the quality of American bees? Presumably, the Canada Food Inspection Agency has a reason why it's not allowing American bees in. What do you think?
They deem that the bees are too high a risk, and they've done their research. We're not exactly satisfied with the conclusions they came to, and we think that they're missing some data. So we're supplying more scientific data. They have a period asking for input here to try and lower those risks, as well as come in with other programs. And the other fact of the matter is that a lot of U.S. bees have been entering into Canada for decades by flying across the border. You have millions of beehives that sit across the southern borders of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, into Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick, that fly into Canada, pollinate crops, and fly back.
So they get across the border either way, you're saying?
Regardless, they are coming into Canada every season by flying across. They don't have a passport.
And and then if you do order stocks, or if you were able to, do you think that there'd be fewer that would die in the shipping, like when they do come from so far away, like New Zealand?
Absolutely. Then we can use semis for transport, and they can be in climate-controlled reefers that can monitor temperature. If there is an issue in transport, the driver can always then use extreme methods, such as getting a fire department to cool the load if something were to happen. If you have an AC unit or some malfunction in an airplane, you can't stop the plane and open up the doors for ventilation.
Yeah. How are you doing, Aussie? Knowing that, the possibility this winter could be devastating for your hives and your family business that's been around for decades. How does that make you feel?
It's hard to keep morale up, especially even with our crew. We've got a very good crew, but going into winter when everyone sees that the bees aren't looking well and and they're sick, everyone gets disheartened, and was it us that made a mistake? And, you know, we've looked over and over, and we've done everything right, and still you end up with dead bees, and just the willingness to keep on going is fading.
Wow. Well, I wish you the best of luck and the bees as well. Let's hope that it's not as bad as they're saying. And I wish the best for you and your family.
Hope for the best and prepare for the worst. That's all you can do.
Good for you. Thank you, Aussie.
All right. Bye.
That was Aussie Podolsky from Podolsky Honey Farms in Ethelbert near Riding Mountain National Park. And Aussie is also a member of the Manitoba Beekeepers Association.
Everybody knows a turkey and some mistletoe help to make the season bright. But singing along to Yuletide classics and new holiday favorites is what really makes the holly jolly. CBC Music unwraps the gift of holiday playlists to get you into the festive spirit. From pop to jazz, gospel, folk, blues, classical, country, and so many more. Now available on the CBC Listen app.
It's 12:15. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, 90.9 FM in Flin Flon, 105.3 FM in Swan River. Taking a look at the temperatures around the province, right now Churchill is the hot spot at minus 17, and the cold spot is Lynn Lake right now at minus 34. In Brandon, it's minus 31 and sunny. And looking at Dauphin, sunny and minus 24. Flin Flon, sunny and minus 28. Light snow and minus 19 in Gillam. Island Lake, light snow and minus 19. Norway House, mainly sunny, minus 26. In Portage, sunny and minus 24. To Dooley Lake, cloudy and minus 29. The Paw, sunny, minus 26. Thompson Airport, minus 28 and partly cloudy. And at the Winnipeg Airport, minus 25 and mostly cloudy. Here in Winnipeg, it's going to be mainly sunny this afternoon. Wind chill minus 32. The high will technically be minus 24, but it's going to feel more like the minus 30s with the wind. Tonight, mainly clear, minus 31 in the evening, but minus 27 by the morning. So the temperature will be going up. And for tomorrow, mainly sunny with a high in the afternoon of minus 17, but pretty windy with some gusts up to 50 kilometers an hour. It's 12:17 and you're listening to CBC Radio 1. The holiday season is often seen as a time of joy, but it can also be full of stress, anxiety, and loneliness. For some, family gatherings, events, and obligations are ramping up, while others might find themselves overwhelmed or isolated. Wendy Bueller is a counselor with Bueller Counseling in Steinbach, and she says 1 in 10 Canadians report feeling lonely at this time of year. Wendy has some tips for folks on how to manage feelings of loneliness over the holidays. She spoke with CBC's Corey Funk.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks for joining us. So 1 in 10 Canadians say they're feeling lonely. What are you noticing in terms of at your practice? What are you hearing from people right now?
Yeah, people are feeling lonely. They may not know, maybe there's a lot of social anxiety going on right now. I think that the time that we spent at home where we couldn't see people has that trend has continued, where people are a little bit hesitant, and now there's family drama, and so they kind of are isolating themselves, and in turn it's turned to loneliness. So it's a little bit tricky.
Right, I guess that social anxiety and that loneliness is a vicious cycle, right? Because you do one to avoid the other often, right? So
yeah,
with that in mind, how do you kind of set those boundaries, particularly if social anxiety is your thing, but you still need to get out to do things to keep you from being lonely?
Right. I think a big part is, I think the acronym that I had last year was SANTA. S stands for set clear boundaries. It's okay to have a set time limit. It's okay to not be able to stay the whole time. Lots of people like to guilt trip you into staying, and I think just showing up is huge. A stands for ask for help. If you're struggling or you're not sure what to do, then ask for help. N stands for no. It's okay to say no. We don't have to say yes to every event that comes our way. Sometimes we need to listen to our own bodies and know when it's time to say no. I can't make all of these things. And T is take care of yourself. When you're noticing that you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed, you need to take a step back and do something for yourself, like read, watch a movie, do something artistic. There's a whole lot of things that we can do to take care of ourselves. And A stands for avoid engaging in negative conversations. If there's a topic that you don't really want to discuss, it's okay to say something like, this isn't the place to have this kind of a conversation.
I'm also thinking about the people who, let's say in September or October, put up their hand on the family WhatsApp, says, "Oh yeah, I'll host, no big deal." And then now, the gravity of that decision is now starting to come upon them.
Yes.
And they're worried about it. What advice do you give to those folks who are realizing you can't really avoid social anxiety as easily when you're, hosting?
Right. Yeah. I think if you're really struggling, if it's taking a toll on your mental health, I think it's admirable to be able to say, hey, you know what? I think I bit off more than I can chew. Is somebody else able to host? I think there should be merit in that. But on the other side, chances are when you actually get into it and the people are there, you're going to have a good time. And the more we give into our social anxiety and withdraw, the more we're going to want to withdraw, like that cycle that we were talking about earlier. And so sometimes it's just best to jump in with both feet and do what's manageable and have a good time.
And what about some ways in terms of loneliness? And that might even sometimes be hard to avoid because maybe you want to get out, but you can't. Well, what's your advice for folks there?
Yeah, I have a few suggestions there. Number one is do something special for yourself. Go to a movie, do something, do a holiday project or something that is special to you. Create new memories with yourself. Or the opposite is focus on other people, volunteer. There's lots of organizations out there right now that are looking for helpers to deliver hampers or food or serving food. And so to do something for somebody else. Or maybe you know somebody else that's struggling. Maybe they're feeling lonely and you can get together with a group of people and do something together and create a little community for yourself. Or even go old school and write letters and holiday cards or connect with people by phone. I think that's something that we've been missing in these last few years. And so, that may make you feel a little bit better too.
I'm also thinking about, there's these varying levels of either loneliness or social anxiety. You might be feeling a little lonely or a little anxious and you kind of find ways, yourself to cope. But, what if it's getting deeper than that, right? Into depression or
Yes.
things like that. What can people do if, they're really struggling and they just need help more than they can help themselves?
Right. It's definitely important to know that you're not alone. There are other people feeling the same way. Holidays aren't magical for everyone. It's not the most wonderful time. It maybe for you, it's filled with challenges and triggers and memories of Christmases past that weren't so awesome. So be prepared when you're going into either a Christmas gathering or a work event or something. Prepare yourself. That's where we said set those boundaries. If you're dreading it, don't let them just happen to you. Get in front of them. Take good care of yourself ahead of time. Make sure you're eating properly, getting enough sleep, having enough downtime. And if you're really struggling, know that there's help and hope. If you're having suicidal thoughts or if you realize somebody else that you know maybe is acting a little bit different, please reach out. Either call 988 or a crisis hotline. Or if you have a friend that's struggling, then ask them point blank, like, are you okay? I'm here to help. So be prepared to listen.
Well, Wendy, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much and enjoy the holidays.
Thank you. You too.
Wendy Bueller is a counselor with Bueller Counseling in Steinbach, and she spoke with CBC's Corey Funk. It's 23 minutes after 12 o'clock, and you're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1. For a lot of people, the official start of the holiday season is American Thanksgiving. And if that's the case for you, well, we're now 2 weeks in, and you're probably already nearing the breaking point when it comes to festive music. Well, CBC's Doug Hempstead is here to help. He created a playlist of non-Christmas music that vaguely sounds like it could be, thanks to its use of sleigh bells. As Doug explains, his playlist is designed to be just as easy on the ears of the overstimulated faithful as it is on those who don't celebrate the holiday.
Ho, ho, ho! Wait a second. This isn't Sleigh Ride. This is Hare Krishna by Husker Du. But did you notice just how much it sounds like a holiday song when you add a Santa chuckle? You know why that is, right? Sleigh bells. You'll hear them in every style of song. Their light, percussive sound is like a gentler, more festive tambourine. If Tori Amos's Cornflake Girl was called Snowflake Girl, you probably would have heard it in the mall several times by now. I started to hear those jingling bells, and the next thing I know, I had a whole playlist of songs like this. 2 hours worth. Non-seasonal songs that have significant amounts of sleigh bells in them. You'd be surprised just how common it is. I've never really understood why the keyboard solo in Bonnie Tyler's 1983 smash hit Total Eclipse of the Heart is so dramatic. The crash of thunder, and then those sleigh bells. But this isn't a Christmas song. Christmas songs have bright noses, not bright eyes. Jim Steinman wrote this. It's the same guy who wrote Bat Out of Hell. But once you know that, it starts to make a bit more sense. These songs are everywhere, from powder kegs giving off sparks to the way the sunlight plays upon her hair. Like I said, I have a whole playlist of these things. It's a preventative measure. While I write this, it's the second week of December, and we've been bombarded with holiday songs since mid-November. Really, it seems to start right after Halloween. We go from Monster Mash to Mr. Grinch seemingly overnight. And then the great debate begins anew. Do you love or hate that synth flick in Wonderful Christmas Time? It seems as soon as the Grey Cup is awarded, we start our next favorite competition, Whamageddon. Even if you love the holidays, this can grate on you by the second week of December. And so we have Doug's Batman Smells playlist to the rescue, because let's say you don't actually celebrate Christmas, or you just don't love the music. For lots of folks, these holiday songs are just annoying, unrelatable earworms. For the rest of us, they're kitschy jingles with the shelf life of sliced turkey. My playlist of non-Christmas songs that sound like Christmas songs will give you the respite you need to make it to New Year's Eve. Or it's a way of creating a holiday ambiance without patty-caking your friends with boy childs, frosty, jingle cats, and chimney fantasies. Even Radiohead can be jolly. Well, maybe not jolly, but even indie rockers like a little mistletoe once in a while, as long as it's dark, nuanced, and tortured. Yep, sleigh bells can be found in the strangest of places. Let's not forget, before Iggy Pop was a frontman, he was a little drummer boy.
So messed up, I want you here.
But perhaps you'd like a pseudo-holiday song that's a little more chill. Death Cab for Cutie have got you covered.
I want to live where soul meets body.
Oh, oh, oh. See, it works. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about Canadian content. Broken Social Scene brought their sleigh bells. And here's Prince. Prince was Christian, a pretty conservative one at that, for somebody who had a boatload of songs crammed with double entendres. So let's just pretend the title track from his 1994 album Come is actually directed at All Ye Faithful. So this is my advice this holiday season. Sure, go ahead and make a festive playlist, but for your own sanity, as well as the respect and admiration of your friends or co-workers, make a second one with Christmas-adjacent songs. All they need is sleigh bells. For CBC Radio, I'm Doug Hempstead.
When I call won't tell you what to wear. Come, don't be surprised if I tell you to go bare. Come, long as you wash between your
I like Doug Hempstead's playlist. Thanks to him for this report. And on the days he's not listening deeply for the sound of sleigh bells in popular music, he's the CBC Ottawa traffic specialist. Well, we're coming up on local news time, and still to come on our call-in conversation. It's the largest property tax hike in 34 years. And the city of Winnipeg plans to raise taxes 5.95% in 2025. How do you feel about that property tax hike and how the money is expected to be spent? You can call us already, 204-780-0893. The news is next.
This is CBC News. At 12:30, we're minus 23 with an extreme cold warning and sunny skies in downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. Manitoba Mounties say it'll take time to figure out why there are nearly double the amount of homicides this year than last year. But there are clues, they say. So far in 2024, there have been 56 homicides. Last year, there were 30. Major Crime Superintendent Rob Lasson says since the pandemic, there has been an overall increase in violent crimes in our province, but 2024 is significantly higher.
Is this just an anomaly year where we've seen an increased number, or is this going to be a continued trend? But we'll know more as we go into 2025. What I have to say is part of the reason our numbers increased, we had a couple very tragic incidents where we had 3-person homicides and then a 5-person homicide.
Lasson says many of the homicides have involved gang violence and retaliation, and most often involve people who are known to each other. Winnipeg City Hall is voting on 2 major pieces of the transportation network, one of which concerns Wellington Crescent. A motion to lower the speed limit on Wellington to 30 kilometers an hour ran out of gas last week. In a narrow vote, the Executive Policy Committee stripped out the section telling city staff to immediately put up new speed limit signs. Cycling advocates and some city councillors have pushed for the lower speed as a way to improve safety. A man was hit and killed by a speeding driver in the summer. But Mayor Scott Gillingham raised concerns about the wider impacts of this on the surrounding streets. Council will also vote on a report laying out costs for replacing the Arlington Bridge. The 2025 draft budget unveiled yesterday had no money devoted to the work needed to demolish the aging bridge. And Alberta's government is taking action, like ours, to secure the southern border. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says the province is putting $29 million into creating a new sheriff patrol unit. It's tasked with cracking down on illegal migrants and drug trafficking across the Canada-U.S. border.
Together with federal law enforcement, we'll ensure that our section of the American border is well protected. We'll deny safe haven to criminals looking to operate in both countries. And if we succeed and maintain proper border security, I expect we will have a very strong relationship with the United States, as we always have.
The unit will include a K-9 team, helicopters, and drones. The announcement comes as both Ottawa and the provinces are scrambling to respond to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's demands to further secure the border. For news anytime, you can head to cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can use the CBC News app.
Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
That's Matt Humphrey, who was joining us from the CBC Manitoba newsroom. And in studio with us now is our weather specialist, Riley Leitchuk. Still cold out there?
Another bitter one out there.
Yeah.
There's some relief on the way, Emily.
Well, that's great.
There's some relief on the way. Brandon right now, minus 29, minus 25 at the moment in Winnipeg. Actually, most of the Red River Valley sitting between minus 25, minus 27 at the moment. Lynn Lake, minus 31. Thompson, minus 28 right now. With the wind chill, looking at minus 41 with the wind in Brandon at the moment. Again, frostbite on exposed skin in less than 10 minutes. So we're looking at some very, very cold conditions through the western part of the province. The wind chill factor right now in Winnipeg at minus 36. Doesn't mean it's not cold out there, but relatively speaking, not as cold as it is to the west at the moment. We're still under extreme cold warnings through most of southern Manitoba, Winnipeg, Brandon, the southern Interlake, into Lynn Lake and to Dooley Lake. Now we're looking at wind chill values in that northwestern corner of the province, as cold as minus 45 on exposed skin,
Oh, my
which
goodness.
is frostbite in minutes out there. So
That's
we're looking
overwhelming.
again, some very cold conditions. Another mostly sunny day, a little bit of cloud out there. But other than that, another bright one really across the province today as we get through into the day tomorrow. A little bit of cloud mixes in, but again, another mainly sunny day. Our winds shift from the south. And what that is going to do is start to push in some warmer southerly air and get this Arctic ridge that we've been under kind of moved along back further to the north of us. So we'll get a bit of relief temperature-wise tomorrow, but we get some more substantial warmth as we get into the weekend with a little bit more cloud as we get into the weekend. That's sort of the trade-off that we get here. Minus 24 this afternoon in Winnipeg, looking at a minus 26 high in Brandon. Thompson minus 25 this afternoon as well. Up to minus 17 for the afternoon temperature tomorrow. South winds 30 gusting to 50. Could see some gusts even higher out in the open areas in the Red River Valley. Warming up to minus 14 by Saturday morning. Saturday afternoon, minus 7. Minus 3 for Sunday, and then we see another area of low pressure that could give us a little bit of flurries through the early part of Monday, and we're looking at the temperature falling to minus 10.
Okay, well, that's a little more manageable.
Yeah, a little more manageable. Exactly.
Thank you so much,
You're
Riley.
welcome.
That's Riley Lachuk. He's our weather specialist here at CBC Manitoba. He'll be back later this afternoon on Up to Speed, which is our radio show from 3 to 6 p.m. And you can also watch him on TV on the CBC Winnipeg News at 6. It's 12:35 right now. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, 105.3 FM in Dauphin, and 105.1 FM in Shamattawa. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today as your host. Well, Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham has unveiled the city's $1.4 billion spending plan for 2025. The new budget calls for a 5.95% property tax hike. It's the largest that Winnipeg has seen in 34 years, and that's up from a 3.5% increase last year. The mayor says the extra $44 million it will bring in will go to public safety, snow clearing, and road repairs, and will also help cover transit fare revenue shortfalls and fire paramedic injuries. How do you feel about the property tax hike and the ways in which the city plans to spend the extra revenue for next year? Give us a call, 204-780-0893. Again, that line, 204-780-0893. And you can also text us at 204-588-7355. And joining us in studio now is Gage Hobrick. He's Prairie Director with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Hi, Gage.
Hey, Emily. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. So what was your reaction to the property tax hike of 5.95%?
Well, the biggest problem for taxpayers is it comes at a really difficult time. I don't think you can talk to anyone these days without affordability being top of mind about how everything's getting more expensive. And this property tax hike is really tip of the iceberg, right? We're going to see higher also sewer and utility rates from the city soon. And if things go the way in the provincial way, the gas tax might be back in January. So it's just adding on a lot of cost to families that are having trouble affording it. So we're hoping that the mayor can get maybe closer to what he promised, to that 3.5% hike, and maybe save taxpayers money that way instead of piling on more costs.
Meanwhile, though, I guess the costs for the city are still going up, and so the money's got to come from somewhere. I mean, what do you think? That's their argument. They need money to cover all the rising costs for their operations. What would you say?
No, exactly. And it's definitely a balancing act. And we're looking at this property tax hike, and we're seeing it, what the mayor says it's going to go to is things that the city should be spending on some kind of basics, like, 2 points to roads. That's always important. So the main thing is going to be making sure that the city actually does spend it on those important infrastructure things. But the mayor also understands that it is a lot for taxpayers. He says he's going to have a budget management team that, because the budget isn't approved yet, we still have some time to give feedback. He's going to go in and try to see if there is some way to find savings to make that a little bit less on taxpayers. Because it's important to highlight that when you have property taxes, it doesn't take into account how much money you make every year. So if you're on a fixed income and then your house value happens to go up, you're paying more in taxes next year despite not making any more money, and that takes a bigger chunk out of your wallet.
Mm. What do you think? We're speaking with Gage Hobrick, and he's the Prairie Director with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He's giving his views on the Winnipeg City budget, which calls for a property tax hike of 5.95%. What is your opinion on the budget? Give us a call, 204-780-0893. Again, that's 204-780-0893. And texting is also an option if that works better for you, 204-588-7355. Again, 204-588-7355. So, Gage, you did touch a bit on how the money's going to be spent. What do you think of how it's earmarked in this potential increase?
Well, one of the most interesting things is there are going to be 115 new employees coming in next year over this year. And when you're looking at savings as a city government, that's kind of the number one thing you have to see. The government said there is going to be no cuts this year. So it's always a balancing act there, right? Like we're talking about how much this extra is going to cost taxpayers. The city's saying they need to spend money on it. But what we're trying to highlight is that the most important thing is that the mayor should try his best to get back to what he promised when he was running, that 3.5% hike, and then hopefully have the hit to taxpayers be a little bit less than this 30-year high.
Well, and speaking of what taxpayers might pay, the draft budget would see taxes on a home that's assessed at $371,000 rise about $121 next year. I mean, when you think about it, that's $10 a month. With the rising costs and having to pay for everything for the city. Is that really a significant rise?
Well, it's affordable for some, but right, we're talking about property taxes. So if someone had a bad year last year, their property taxes don't change with how much income they make, so it could take a bigger chunk out of their wallet. But it's also important to highlight that while we're looking at the city saying they're in this financial hole right now, and this is going to be a thing that isn't expected, whenever someone moves to raise taxes, it's always important to be a little bit skeptical, to not give them free rein to keep doing it in the future when that rate might even be higher.
But compared to other Canadian cities, Winnipeg's property tax is still pretty affordable. I mean, don't we have room to increase taxes? I know you touched on some people for whom it's not affordable, but for a lot of people, there is a lot of extra room. And, we need snow clearing, we need the roads fixed and stuff. What would you say?
No, and I think that's fair. But the key going forward is that it's something to be proud of, that Winnipeg has one of the lowest property tax rates in the country. It means it's easier for people looking for a place to move to. It's easier for them to decide on Winnipeg, and that's one of the ways to grow the city, right? If you keep hiking it up, you're going to lose that gap, and you're not going to get that bonus that a low property tax brings you. So it's about that balancing act as well.
But with a rising population, you do need more services, right? So the prices are going up for the city.
Right, exactly. But as you get more people in, they're going to be buying houses. They're going to be having more stuff. They're going to be adding to that property tax base as well. So it's important to see that when you're getting people to move here, hopefully part of that is because there's those low property taxes, because that's something that can draw you to a place like Winnipeg that, might not necessarily have the draw of a city like Toronto or something like that.
Well, what do you think? Maybe you're someone who came to Winnipeg partly because the property taxes are lower and you found it more affordable to buy a home. Give us a call, 204-780-0893, 204-780-0893, or text us at 204-588-7355. Let us know your opinion on what you think about the Winnipeg City budget that's proposed for next year, and the fact that property taxes will go up close to 6%. And apparently the total projected property tax haul for this year is $798 million, Gage. That covers about 56% of city spending. Like, how does that ratio compare with other cities if we're only covering 56%?
Well, there's always a lot of things that cities do to get money. You don't have the exact numbers, right? But you're getting those transit fees in there. Winnipeg has the business tax, everything like that, the stuff you pay for services. So it would be interesting to look at how the ratio compares to everywhere. But, we've seen in the last few years, the city government has still spent more money year after year, and now they're getting to that crunch. So we're hoping that they can actually use this to set themselves up for the future and not have to do such a drastic hike in the coming years.
And something that one of our journalists has pointed out in his analysis piece, Bartley Kivas, is that the city's rainy day fund, that extra money to cover incidentals is soon going to be down at zero when really he says that it should be around $86 million. How are we going to replenish that if we don't raise taxes?
Well, that's going to be key, right? So if the city does go forward, we get this full 5.95% hike, and the city says we're going to use it for all these important things. The next step for taxpayers is to make sure the city actually follows through on that. And a really important part of that is making sure that the rainy day fund has enough money in it so we're not looking at huge tax hikes like this in the future.
Okay. Well, we do have a caller. Adam is on the line, and he says he does own a home, and we want to hear what he has to say. Hi, Adam. Tell us what you're on Radio Noon. Tell us what you have to say.
Oh, hey. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I'm very passionate about this issue because, I work really hard. I try and volunteer with homeless institutions and pet shelters, and I work, just like a regular, normal blue collar guy in Winnipeg. Winnipeg's pretty blue collar, and I work hard, and I have to do side jobs every weekend. I never take a day off. I work 7 days a week, and as soon as I start getting ahead, there's always a bill or something that comes up, and I don't really have any expenses. I don't have a criminal record. I don't do hard drugs. I'm just a good working guy, but it's just so hard to save money. And then every time I get my tax bill, I'm fighting to try and pay it. But as I was saying to the gentleman who answered my call initially, I was listening to a news article that stated one of the greatest threats to society is when our governments and public institutions act in ways that have the public lose their faith in them. And when you go on social media and you see social media posts and you read the threads and the comments, there's a lot of bad ones, a lot of good ones, but a lot of people say in things that they're just losing trust in our government. So I think there's a lack of forward thinking, and I think it's just really poor management, poor fiscal management going on. And I think that the fact that they don't focus on gaining trust with the public is a real serious concern of mine.
Adam, what would you want them to do, though, when they say that the cost for everything is going up? There's more demand for services. Like, how's the city supposed to make ends meet, though, if they don't raise property taxes?
Well, that's a great question. Like I said earlier, I'm a blue collar, so I'm 55 years old. I'm just a regular, normal working guy. Happy to do my share, and I know a lot of guys that snow clearing guys and regular trades guys and stuff, and we all talk and when we have beers on the weekend or something, and a lot of the I'm not going to lie to you, a lot of the sentiment is that anybody who works for the city knows that there's very poor management going on. And there's if you ask anybody out there, ask any blue collar or any older guy who's working for the city or and ask them what they think, and they'll tell you right away. There's a lack of forward thinking. There's just there's a lack of creative thinking and forward thinking. It's just business as usual. Oh well, raise the taxes, and then that's just common sense from what I think.
Well, thank you for that call, Adam. What do you think, Gage? Like, could there be a system maybe where if someone is struggling financially, like a sliding scale, or has any city ever thought of something like that?
I'm not sure what exists because the property tax system is one that kind of hampers on that it is just on property, right? And I think that what Adam says is kind of the most important thing, that every day there's just another bill that he has to pay. So going forward, I think it would be worth something for the city to look into and find a way to make sure that those who are the least well off and still manage to have their own house or something like that, they're just getting by, to make sure they're not as impacted by these types of hikes as maybe someone else, to make sure that those who can't afford it don't have to pay it.
Yeah, that could be another approach. We have Max on the line. He is a homeowner, and he says that he doesn't worry about taxes going up. He worries more about how the city is spending the money. Hi, Max. Tell us more about what you think.
Well, it always strikes me that the city spends so much money on million dollar cost overruns on police stations or roads, yet doesn't seem to find $80,000 for a swimming pool. So many of the small things that make a city livable are being swept under the rug in favor of these massive, massive construction projects that seem as if the city really doesn't actually know how to buy billion-dollar projects.
And Max, you must be talking about the Happy Land pool.
Yeah.
Are you saying that we need to put aside more for recreation?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you have an awful lot of people in the inner city who need swimming pools, library, recreational facilities. We shut them all down and wonder why kids get in trouble. Yet, if you've got a $10 million overrun on a road, people go, oh, that's too bad. I guess we'll write a check for $10 million. That's the thing that really, like a breath of fresh air, goes right up my nose. I don't mind paying more tax if I see city services and not just massive projects actually come to fruition.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that call, Max. Well, Gage, what do you think about expenses like recreation that, might cost a lot up front, but is actually delivering, a lot of value to people?
Well, I think Max's underlying opinion is something that we've heard a lot from taxpayers, and even the first caller, is that when they're being told that they're going to have to pay more taxes to the city, most people may say, okay, well, that could be good if I'm getting what I promised. But we've heard a couple times that people are saying, but they're not spending it in things that I think are important, and instead getting those huge cost overruns that aren't exactly a surprise when it happens in government projects. So I think that's important for the city to think about as well, is if they are going to demand and get to this highest in 30 years property tax increase, then when they actually end up spending the money, it gets results. So Winnipeggers are happy with what they're paying.
Okay, we have another caller, Jorge, who says he's okay with taxes going up. Hi, Jorge. Tell us more about what you think.
Hi. Yeah, I'm actually okay with the tax hike. I just moved into a more affordable neighborhood recently, and it's more money coming out of my pocket, yes, but I understand I'm getting the services, a very fair amount of services for the money I'm getting. My proposal will be charging people I understand that the price of property kind of drives the price of tax, so I understand that the wealthier people are paying more by and large. But I think we should also charge landlords more money for taxes, for rentals. And I agree that the city spends way too much money on police. We wanted to cut the $3 million budget for cultural institutions, and still it's the same city that wanted to build a ridiculous Keniston expansion. And so I think that the mayor is just learning the realities of how a city is run, as opposed to like what he said on the campaign, and I'm okay with that. I wouldn't have voted for him, but I'm okay with this particular issue. My last thing that I wanted to say is that it's very clear to me that this is a suburbs first government. This is a suburbs first mayor. Everything goes to the suburbs first. They get the nice pool. They get the tennis courts. They're okay to spend $20 million on tennis courts in the suburbs and not in the inner city. So I think the suburbs should be paying way more taxes than the inner city. That's what I think.
And so what would your priority be then for spending? You touched on you don't think that Keniston Road extension is a good idea for spending all that money, and that police, you think that they're spending too much on that. Tell us about that and why you don't think that should be the priority.
Well, the Keniston expansion will raise our taxes 14% globally for the whole city for the next 25 years. So it's a really stupid thing to do. But also the police, the police can't prevent crime. They can't make the city more livable. They can only punish crime. So we need to have services that allow us to actually prevent crime, that allows us to make the city less poor and more livable. That's why cultural institutions should be receiving more funding. And ultimately, poverty is not something that the government of a city can deal with. That's a federal issue. That's an all-around macroeconomic issue, not an economy of the city. Of course, we're dealing with poverty and homelessness, and in all-around kindness wrong, and as a city. But that should be the priority. The priority should be making the city more livable, and that means better transportation for everybody, less cars. There's endless amounts of research about this that city planners in the city of Winnipeg know really well, but they kind of have to navigate these government issues. And I'm okay with starting having frank conversations about paying more taxes, not just at the city level, but at the national level, because we do have to have better services. This is a first world country. I migrated here from a third world country to pay more taxes, because when you have more taxes, you have a better lifestyle. That's just how it is. And so, it's, of course, it's great that we have scrutiny about how our taxes are used. Great things. But if we're not getting anywhere with the amount of taxes we're paying, we should be raising them.
Thank you so much for your call, Jorge. We appreciate that. And Gage, you heard Jorge say, with higher taxes, you have a better standard of living. How would you reply to that?
I would reply to what Jorge said. The most important thing is making sure, though, that if you are going to be paying those higher taxes, that there is that scrutiny. That's one of the most important things. It can't just go into some sort of revenue black hole. And I think the city is trying the best on this one to actually tell you where it's going, right? We talked about they're going to do 2 points for roads, 1.5 to general revenue and transit, and then the rest over to police and snow removal. So the most important is, says, okay, if we're paying more money to get these more services, if it's needed, there needs to be follow-up afterwards to make sure that's actually where the money went and it wasn't blown on cost overruns, as other callers said, but instead actually used to deliver new services.
And what do you make of the new spending for police? The mayor saying that public safety would be improved by that. Is that something that is worthy of raising taxes for?
Well, I've heard that it's something that small businesses are calling for quite a bit in the last, and they're the ones who've been paying a big chunk of those taxes. So I think that moving in that direction to help them out is a good thing. Now, of course, other callers are also highlighting that necessarily maybe the police aren't what's causing crime and something like that, maybe putting a Band-Aid on already existing problems. So that's a conversation to have. But then again, when against the whole cost of that thing, it has to be made sure that it's within a cost the taxpayers can afford, and the amount of money that's being spent isn't being spent on some brand new police headquarters with a bunch of cost overruns, but actually getting the job done on the ground.
But if it didn't go through, could Winnipeg decrease services? What would you cut then, Gage?
Well, that's the thing, right? It's going to be it's a tough job. We're looking at a city that has done fairly well at keeping the property taxes low, and if people are demanding that the city do more, then it makes sense that they would have to pay more. But it's also looking at things like those 115 FTEs in the new year, the ones that aren't necessarily going to be important for public safety or policing. We could look at not keeping them around, not hiring in new positions that are unfilled, and try and get some savings back in attrition that way. And that's because when you look at a city like this, over half the city's spending is going to be on salaries and benefits. So if you want to find savings, you have to look there.
Well, we thank you for coming in, Gage, and taking the time to weigh in on the city budget. That's Gage Hobrick. He's Prairie Director with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and we were talking about the proposed property tax hike of 5.95%.
It's one of the most anticipated CBC music events of the year. Joy to the World, Euro Radio Christmas Music Day. Hi, I'm Paolo Pietropaulo, and I'd like to invite you to join me as I take you to the concert halls and churches of Europe and to Montreal for classical holiday favorites. Sunday, December 22nd, starting at 9 a.m., 9:30 in Newfoundland on CBC Music. And on the CBC Listen app. For the full broadcast schedule, go to cbcmusic.ca/joy.
Just a few minutes before 1 o'clock, and you're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1. And we're joined now by the host of Up to Speed, Faith Fundal. Hi, Faith.
Hello, Emily. It is the only full-time Air Force band in Canada, and it's right here in Winnipeg. We're going to hear about how the Royal Canadian Air Force Band is preparing for its big holiday concert, a fundraiser for the United Way. And we're also going to hear more from a Winnipeg songwriter who has received one of the highest honors in the country. Steve Bell received the Order of Canada at a ceremony in Ottawa today and appointed to the order for his acclaimed music career and advocacy for social justice. We'll hear more from him about what it all means and what he thinks.
Congratulations to Steve Bell.
Big deal.
We have a lot of musical talent in this city.
We do. And a lot of folks love Steve Bell. So not surprising that he received this honor. And I think it was announced that he would get it some time ago. And he finally got to actually be able to have the ceremony, which is nice.
He managed to keep it a secret that long. And then also you mentioned the Royal Canadian Air Force Band.
Yes.
We're lucky enough they're headquartered here, right?
It's so nice. My partner is in it.
Yes.
He's the flautist. As I like to tell him, it's the gayest instrument and it's fine.
And he's a bagpiper.
He is. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, it's quite fun. Shanley Vidal went to one of their practices, so we'll We'll hear how it sounds ahead of the concert.
Yeah, I'm sure it sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Faith.
Thank you.
That's Faith Fundal, the host of Up to Speed, and that program's on these airwaves from 3 to 6 p.m. Well, that's about going to do it for Radio Noon for today. Thank you to everyone who is in the crew today for this show. Our studio technician is Marshall Hodgins. Corey Funk is our show director, and Kevin Nipatebo is producing the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. I'm Emily Brass, filling in as your host, and coming up next on CBC Radio 1, it's Quirks and Quarks with Bob McDonald. Have a great afternoon.